Welcome to Poland Daily. I'm Nicholas Richardson and this is the news. The district prosecutor's office in Szczecin has opened a case in relation to the events leading to the suicide of the 15-year-old son of a Civic Platform Deputy. According to opposition leaders, the culprits behind the tragedy are journalists from Radio Szczecin and TVP who publicised Krzysztof F's sex crimes and made it possible to identify his victims. According to TVP Info, it was Civic Platform MP Piotr Boris who was the first to reveal information during a live programme that eventually allowed the identification of Krzysztof F's victims. The state was supposed to take care of this family, which was the victim of a crime. The mother and son acted with extreme courage and dignity at a very difficult time. They became victims of the state. The whole scandal has to do with the revelation of information about Civic Platform activist Krzysztof F., who was sentenced to 4 years and 10 months in prison in December 2021 for the crimes of paedophilia, drug possession and inciting minors to use intoxicating substances. He was a representative of the Marshal of the West Pomeranian Voivodeship, Olgierd Geblevich, for addiction issues. In addition, he supported the election campaign of Warsaw Mayor Rafał Trzaskowski. This is, one might say, a stunt to cover Civic Platform's problems of paedophilia in its own environment. This person was in his office for 14 years and was responsible for educating young people. The case was only publicised at the end of last year, including by Radio Szczecin. Yesterday evening, the entrance to the radio station was doused with red paint. Earlier, radio journalists received death threats. Expressing great sympathy to Nicholas's loved ones, we would like to emphasise that the circumstances of the tragedy are yet to be clarified by the state authorities appointed for this purpose. Thus, bearing in mind the relevant proceedings and above all the wishes of the next of kin, we refrain from any comments. At the same time, we are appalled and overwhelmed by the magnitude of the heckling against any employee of Radio Szczecin. We have decided until the funeral not to comment on the matter at all. We have heeded the mother's request, but at this time it is impossible to remain silent when very many of our journalists, but also journalists from public television or Radio Szczecin, are receiving multiple death threats. There are already the first attempts to attack the editorial staff. It is clear that the opposition is trying to build a political prey for itself out of this. One of the victims of the paedophile, the son of a Civic Platform deputy, committed suicide. Opposition politicians and parts of the liberal media are calling for a boycott of TVP Info and Radio Szczecin, claiming that they provided information allowing Krzysztof F's underage victims to be identified. We should wait for the findings of the prosecutor's office, which is investigating the case. At the moment, we do not know very many things. The idea is to discredit those journalists who ask uncomfortable questions or simply write materials that the platform does not wish to see. A young law and justice activist, Oskar Shafarowicz, was among the victims of the hate campaign. Everything that has happened over the past few days bears the hallmarks of a planned and cynically hijacked campaign, and the tragic death of a young man has only become a pretext for launching it. What I regret most is the rising tide of hate is also affecting my family. I fear for my own safety and that of my loved ones. The action was intended to provide an avalanche of hate and to diffuse emotions. I think this is already a spiral of hate, which on the one hand is to cover up the problems in the Civic Platform, and on the other to blame the authorities for this tragedy. Krzysztof F. has worked at the Marshal's office for more than 20 years, first as an inspector, then as the director of the Department of Social Cooperation. Information on the details of his case, without any personal details or indications to establish them, was provided by Judge Thomas Shai, a spokesman for the district court in Szczecin. Convicted of paedophilia, Krzysztof F. worked with the Society of Friends of Children, among others. Day 378 of the Russian invasion of Ukraine. At a meeting of European Union defence ministers in Stockholm, the NATO Secretary-General said that the Russians are losing more and more troops, but in the coming days Bakhmut may finally fall. He pointed out that even if this happens, it will not necessarily mark a turning point in the war. Our special correspondent, Witold Nowelic, is in the Bakhmut area.
Another day of war in Ukraine was marked by anti-aircraft and anti-missile alerts. But last night was the first night recorded during the war, during which no Ukrainian citizen was injured. As a result, it turned out that there was only a Shahid drone attack. 2 of these weapons were shot down over Kiev. The mayor of Kiev revealed data on the use of Shahid weapons. Since the beginning of the war, these kamikaze drones and their attacks in the Ukrainian capital have claimed 160 lives. Of course, there's fierce fighting going on around Bakhmut, and this is the only place along the entire length of the front where this intensity of hostilities continues. The Russians still fail to break through the line of defense of the Ukrainian army, both in the eastern but also on the northern and southern flanks of these Ukrainian fortifications.
Tak i we wschodniej, ale również na północnym i południowym skrzydle tych fortyfikacji ukraińskich. Prezydent Zełenski oraz szef sztabu generalnego.
President Zelensky and the chief of the general staff expressed gratitude and appreciation to all Ukrainian women who, in the conditions of war, struggle with the hardships of everyday life, but especially those 40,000 women working in the armed forces, and especially those 5,000 women who serve in uniforms on the front line. Of course, the participation of the Minister of Defense, Reznikov, in the Conference of European Union Defense Ministers was highlighted here, if only because of his appeals for the fastest possible delivery of 1,155 caliber rounds and such a very loud call for the fastest possible deliveries of Leopard tanks and armored personnel carriers. Only the possession of these weapons will enable Ukraine to conduct a spring offensive. It is known that an offensive is being prepared.
Riots in Tbilisi. Georgian police clashed in front of parliament with protesters against the Foreign Agents Law, which stipulates that all organisations that receive more than 20% of their funding from abroad are required to register as foreign agents. According to the opposition, this is a law straight from Russia.
No one needed this law. It came from nowhere. But maybe it was dictated from Moscow. It needs to go. I said from the first day that I would veto this law, and I will veto it.
They applied it without us knowing anything, and right now we're back here to protest it until we don't see any changes about it. And the law is Russian, as we all know. It has been implemented in Russia, it has been implemented in Belarus, and we don't want to be part of ex-Soviet Union. We want to be part of European Union.
We need to fight against the rights to be European. So here am I, because for my child's future, I prefer to be a part of the European society.
I came here because I know that my country belongs to Europe, but my government doesn't understand it. And we believe that this is a part of the big play. This is Russia's play. And Putin is facing damage in Ukraine, and they want to gain something here. So we are here to protect our country because we don't want to be part of Russia again.
3.5 million French people, according to labour unions, and 1,300,000, according to police figures, took part in strikes and demonstrations in more than 200 cities on the sixth day of protests against the pension reform, which includes raising the retirement age from 62 to 64.
All those who promise you that you can retire at 60 years old and that you will earn more, I don't believe them. You just have to look at the economic reality. It's sure that when you have been paying social contributions for years, I can understand those French people who can't see themselves working more. But I do think that with regard to that, the government has shown flexibility, and that's why there are discussions in Parliament, so that we can find compromises here and there. Of course, I understand the strike. I support it because I myself will be impacted. For my husband, who is self-employed, it's also very unclear, and he thinks he might have to pay for his retirement on his own, since it's not very clear for self-employed workers. So yes, I understand the strike. Since the beginning of this reform, the government has been repeatedly lying. They claim that this change in retirement age would be inevitable and that it would be the only solution to solve the future deficit of our pension system. However, we have said multiple times that this is false, false, false. This change in retirement age is a choice made by the government and a choice that is unfair. Even if the reform is unpopular for now, we have seen others like this. But when we make policies, we stand by what is right for the country. We condemn the statements that call to bring our economy to its knees, because these statements are irresponsible, and because the only thing that we want to bring to its knees is unemployment. And so we remain open or even eager for dialogue, and we also respect our institutions. It is entirely legitimate for the Parliament to examine, amend and adopt our bill.
That's the news. Thank you for watching. Stay with us for the weather, Poland Daily Business and more programmes. But from me, it's have a good night and a better tomorrow.